please.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks so much for the introduction, and a very good evening to all of you. I'm sharing my screen, so just let me know when that's visible. I'm getting a message saying that sharing screen has been disabled.
Mithali, need your help. Sorry, not Mithali. Manat. Manat, need your help.
Proceed.
Mithali has to share her screen.
Or if the presentation that was sent across, if that could be shared at your end, that's fine as well. Whatever works.
Even I would need the same share screen power, So,
okay,
Manat.
got it.
Manat.
Please proceed.
Okay.
I've given you the rights.
No, you can share it from your side also.
Yeah, Mithali, please.
Yes, please let me know once it's visible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let me begin with a recap of the year 2020 was, particularly in terms of the economic losses that Asia registered. And the numbers are pretty staggering. So the total economic losses that Asia faced was 71 billion US dollars, of which the insured losses was only 8.6 billion US dollars, which means that the protection gap was to the tune of 62 billion US dollars, and that's actually higher than the 2019 number of 50 billion US dollars. And that's not just it. If you look at the 10-year average protection gap, it's 73 billion US dollar, which is even higher.
This is scary. This is absolutely scary.
Exactly. And one important point to note here is that out of the 71 billion US dollars, 64 billion US dollars, which is almost 80% of the total economic losses, were because of natural catastrophes. And that means that it is necessary to investigate the role that climate change possibly plays in driving some of these natural catastrophes. Let me first try to give you all a sense of what are the different types of natural catastrophes and how we can classify them in a way. So there are primary perils, and examples of these include things like earthquake, tropical cyclones, typhoons. These have the highest loss potentials, and therefore it becomes essential to monitor them well. And we have well-structured models in place across regions, across different types of primary perils, because of their high loss potentials, and also because of the fact that there is enough data going back in the history, which makes forecasting them also much structured and much easier. But then there are also secondary perils, which, as opposed to the primary perils, are something that we do not have a good understanding of. And these secondary perils are increasingly forming a large chunk of the total economic losses that we see due to natural catastrophes. So they need to be taken seriously. And these secondary perils can further be classified into two types. One are the secondary effects of the primary perils that we just discussed. So storm surges or tsunami or precipitation related to, say, hurricane or tropical cyclones. And then there are these independent high frequency but low to moderate severity perils, which could also be secondary perils. For example, floods, droughts, wildfire, severe convective storms, which include things like hailstorms, ice storms, thunder. So again, we need to investigate why is it that these secondary perils are increasing, and does climate change play a role in this increasing trend of secondary perils? So the map that you see on the screen right now, it has four charts representing four different regions, and then there is a global chart as well. And in each of these graphs, you see four bars. Roman numbers 1, 2, and 3 represent the trends in tropical cyclone frequency in the next century, classified basis their severity. So category 1 is all tropical cyclone frequency. Roman number 2 shows a little more severe, that is the category 4-5 tropical cyclone frequency. And then the bar 3 or the Roman number 3 represents lifetime maximum intensity tropical cyclone frequency. And the Roman number 4 that you see on the extreme right of every graph, which has that blue box on it, that is basically the precipitation rate associated with these tropical cyclones. So that's the secondary effect of primary peril.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if you see across regions, there seems to be a consensus that the frequency of tropical cyclone in itself may remain either constant or unchanged, or in fact even decrease across some regions, except probably the Western North Pacific Basin, where you can see that for the more severe categories, the tropical cyclone frequency may be increasing to an extent. But what's important to note here is that the precipitation rate associated with this tropical cyclone across regions seems to be increasing, which means that the secondary effect of primary peril or the secondary perils are increasingly becoming loss drivers, even in cases when the primary peril in itself may not be showing an increasing trend or increasing severity in the future.
Mhm.
So now directly coming to the argument that climate change may be the reason behind these natural catastrophes or these secondary perils. So is climate change a reality? I don't think that's that's even a debate that we are having right now. And as Mr. Gupta pointed out, it's a crisis, really, not climate change that we need to think about and
Absolutely
talk
correct.
about.
Absolutely correct.
So, of course, there are two words I have for you on the screen: global warming, and you can see that over the years, annual global average surface temperature has been increasing globally. And climate change is the underlying reason for this, probably. But is climate change in itself, the whole story? Maybe not. Firstly, climate change can be further bifurcated into change that is happening because of natural factors and climate change, which is human induced. And to better explain to you what I'm trying to say here, there is this map that you can see on your screen. And on this map, you can see smaller graphs. Each graph represents a particular area. And you see three different colored lines or strips. You have a black line, bold black line, which is basically showing the observed temperature data from 1910 to 2010. Then there is the purple strip, which is showing model simulations of temperature because of climate change due to natural variability alone. And then there are the pink stripes, which represent model simulations of temperature because of climate change, which takes into account anthropogenic influences. And if you look carefully, you can see that while the pink strips and the black line show an increasing trend, the purple strip remains largely unchanged, which means that any variation in the observed temperature is directly linked to climate change that is taking place because of anthropogenic influences. So the impact of human activity on climate change is absolutely indisputable, probably. And to further explain this argument, let's look at the severe convective losses that takes place in the United States as an example, and that drives losses to at a rate of 6 to 6.4% per annum, which is probably even higher, which is much higher than the economic growth of the country itself. So you get a sense of how severe it is. And what are the reasons that are probably driving these losses in severe convective storms? So you have a number of reasons, each partially explaining or driving these losses. You have economic growth, you have urbanization, and you have spatial expansion. And you also have climate change due to natural factors, you have system vulnerabilities, and you have other hidden loss drivers. And to give you a more illustrative example, you see this picture on the right. It shows a building which is fitted with expensive to build and maintain fragile solar panels. Now, if there was to be a hailstorm tomorrow, this building is going to suffer much larger damages because of these expensive solar panels. And it's not just about this single building. You take into account many such buildings or many such assets over a large area, say a city, which itself is facing the brunt of urbanization, economic growth, and population growth. And you realize how much we have to lose, and what is the extent of economic losses possible. Case in point, Oklahoma, which has seen a huge increase in built up area between 1990 and 2015. So, when there is economic growth, when there is spatial expansion, and then there is climate change, you take into account all these 6 factors together, and that is what is actually driving these losses. Another example, the 2 pictures on your left and right, they are both of Gold Coast, Australia, but taken half a century apart. And you see that in 1955, the picture on your left, the coastline is sparsely populated and they are mostly single-story buildings. But on the right, you see the coastline is densely populated and dotted with huge skyscrapers. So if there was to be a secondary peril hitting the Gold Coast today, say a tsunami, then the extent of losses is going to be far, far more. So, just to summarize what I've been trying to say here is that, climate change is a driver for sure, but may not be the dominant one, because there are a large number of interrelated factors which are at play here. So you do have climate change, which in itself could be either because of natural variability or anthropogenic influences. But you also have socioeconomic changes like population growth, urbanization, economic growth, all sort of interrelated and all sort of leading to a greater degree of hazard, vulnerability, and exposure, which is ultimately leading to the weather-related risks that we see today. And 3 more concrete examples, please bear with me. So, just to show how the role of climate change has definitely been making its mark in some of the recent perils. So in 2018, you have the record-breaking heavy rainfall in Western Japan. And that would have had a mean return period of 68 years in the absence of climate change. But because of climate change, the mean return period today is 21 years. Similarly, the Australian bushfires of 2019-2020, according to the Fire Weather Index, the probability of fire in Australia in 2019 is 4 times more than in 1900. And the rainfall, the severe rainfall that took place in northern India in 2013 would have been a much rarer event in the pre-industrial climate than it is today, only because of climate change. So it definitely, there is a fingerprint of climate change across all such perils that just cannot be ignored. So now I'll hand it over to Jonathan to take you through the rest of the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mithali. So when it comes to designing solutions and actually understanding the risk of these events, this is a spectrum we see. Some of these we can model fairly clearly. So windstorm, Europe, tropical cyclone, we've got very good models. Earthquake, we can. So in the case of tropical cyclone, we have a sense now that they are becoming more severe. The intensity is certainly increasing. But there are other areas where the impact is, we have more limited understanding. There are model gaps. Okay, so where, for example, riverine flooding or hail, or even the secondary effects like Mithali mentioned of some of the primary perils. And at the far end, there are other risks which they're still unmodeled. Yeah, and that's where I think the next generation will have to look at better data and better techniques to see whether we can model some of these and actually tease out the impact of climate and its impact on the assets and exposures. So Mithali, if you can, yeah, next slide. Yes, so Swiss Re Institute, we built a climate economic index, looked at about 50 countries accounting for 90% of global GDP to get a sense of how India ranks, and the numbers are not very flattering. Both in terms of the impact on GDP because of the extreme weather risk, but also because of the adaptive capacity of the country. So there is significant room to grow. India ranks 45 out of these 50 countries, and largely because of our exposure to dry weather risk as well as unpreparedness in terms of adaptive capacity. So there's a significant room to grow. And this is one specific example of how our cities are getting hotter. And 75% of the districts in India are now prone to these extreme weather events, whether it's heat and cold waves, but also cyclones and floods and droughts. And especially our metropolitan cities, I think a previous speaker mentioned how we are migrating towards them, building assets there. They're becoming hotspots of economic activity. We are seeing a drastic increase in the number of extreme hot days. And that's going to significantly impact in the future how much time people can spend outside, how many lives are lost, at what pace economic activity progresses. And the future also is more grim. So mean surface temperature is projected to rise. Some startling numbers here. Hundreds of thousands of people may die in India each year just because of extreme heat. And then you also take into account the rising sea levels, which a previous speaker mentioned. Yes.
Jonathan, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but this is such a grim figure you are giving me. I'm feeling scared. Yeah, I mean, if this is the way things are going, my God, I do not know what will happen.
Yes. So the key question is, what can we do?
Sorry, the idea is to get scared. I think all of us should be in consensus that the end result, despite our divergent beliefs, is to put fear into minds of people so that they
absolutely, sir. Absolutely, sir. I agree.
Absolutely. So, Mithali, if you can go to the last slide, maybe we will. Yes. So, what calls to action? Yes, certainly. Make risk knowledge. I think Mr. Chatterjee did mention we have to understand these better, because only then can we price them appropriately. Only then can we send signals to the market in terms of prioritizing economic activity. So for students and for others who are building careers in CAT modeling, make secondary peril risk knowledge a priority and help improve the modeling capabilities we have in this area. And also for insurers to monitor the claims in more granularity, so you can actually understand what's being caused by what, and then actually share data and share our assumptions. That's where you can support these open source loss modeling frameworks like OASIS and other things, so that we can actually understand better what's driving these perils and understand the correlation between them. So we'll pause there. There's lots of research on the Swiss Re Institute website, our Sigma reports and other documents, but I'm sure the students and others will have time to go through this later. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Mithali. I mean, I have n number of questions. Unfortunately,